Hi everyone, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. If you're watching it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the show, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified when a new show is released. And if you'd like to find links to videos or MP3 files, just go to miamighostchronicles.com, and you can also submit any eerie experiences you've had at the Submit Your Story tab. Also, hook up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find information not only about new shows, but also about monthly free merchandise giveaways. So get comfortable, enjoy this new episode, and just imagine it's a dark and stormy night where not a creature is stirring, not even a mouse. And if a creature is stirring, you hope it's a
way
mouse.
cold north.
Yes. I know. Like I said before, we're truly wimps down here all the way in South Florida because, like I said, it's in the 50s and we're like, oh, it's so cold. And then, you turn on the TV and especially right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, what can I say?
My wife was telling me earlier today when I went home for lunch that this is the first year in February we have not gone on a cruise. And all the cruises we leave on are from Fort Lauderdale. So, 50 degrees to us, my gosh, it's Speedo weather.
I know. And it's inevitable. If you go to the beach, the only people strolling around in their bathing suits or shorts, it's like, you're a tourist, right?
Yeah, you're a snowbird, aren't you? What part of Canada are you from? Hey, listen, Marlene, how did you get started investigating the paranormal? What was it that tweaked your interest to the point where you decided to form your very own group?
Well, I think it starts the same for a lot of people. You grow up, you read the ghost stories, and it still evolves with you as you go along. And little by little, people started asking me about it. And then before you know it, I joined a research foundation here in Florida that basically they just had freelance investigators like myself that they would, depending on what area of Florida they had a case, and they were very scientific. They didn't run out and immediately think that it had something to do with the supernatural, which I thought was great because there's a part of me that's very analytical, and I do have high standards, especially after so many years, as to what truly is supernatural, paranormal, etc. But yeah, it's one of those things that evolves. It creeps up on you little by little till you're earlobe deep in it, like myself. And I worked with a lot of different groups, and I want to say part of it was I was reliable and I knew how to keep my mouth shut, because back when I was doing it versus now that it's become more mainstream, people, especially when we were talking of private residents, they were very concerned about privacy and confidentiality, and many times they were kind of embarrassed, but they were just at their wits' end trying to explain what was going on. So I kind of like, she's one of these that she knows how to keep her mouth shut. And that's basically how and after a while, and I was still around, so I've worked with a lot of different groups, and it just evolved from there until the point that I really never established my own group per se. I always worked with this research foundation, and they knew that I would work with different groups, and in some cases, if they needed a warm body, somebody to go in there and either do a preview, especially with a client, or just last minute emergency, I was usually pretty good for that.
I was just going to say, everybody needs a nice warm body sometimes, especially.
Yes. Well, let me tell you something. I did that for a lot of times.
All right. Welcome. This is this is going to be a different show after that comment. All I can say is that. Listen, how haunted is Miami? Like, I've been to Miami. It's a beautiful city.
It's very haunted. And a lot of times people think of the Miami, the beaches, the tourism. We go back a little bit further, Miami Vice, the Art Deco, but it's I would say that even before maybe the late 1890s, when it was getting established into the 1900s, they used to have the same problem in a lot of cities: yellow fever epidemics. Miami basically was established on the coast, which is now the beach, and of course it grew westward. And there was a lot of unusual things going on. For example, when they had those yellow fever epidemics, they would quarantine people on a ship put him off the coast, and it's like you're staying out there till we allow you to come in. And again, also because in a way it was a port city. A lot of, and then also we had a lot of, initially a lot of the people that came were socialites, that they were being asked to come down here to winter down in Miami. And like in a lot of cities, and when you have prominent families, they try to hush hush all their indiscretions and sometimes mysterious deaths and murders and things of this nature. And you'd be surprised if some of the buildings unfortunately have been demolished. There was a lot of unsolved murders, true crime, and there's actual hauntings attached to a lot of them. Besides the ones that are very well publicized, but of course, as time goes by, they just fade from memory and the headlines, etc.
Sure. What about the influence of organized crime in Miami?
Absolutely. It's. I want to say that like everything else, it's more low key. It's behind the scenes, but as you know, as a matter of fact, the Everglades. There's even. I want to say there's two main roads that run east to west between Miami and the west coast of Florida, and all those two roadways, one of them being US 41. I've had numerous stories told to me about really weird and ghostly things happening out there, and I've verified they've discovered a lot of unidentified bodies. It's like the place to dump a body. And of course, a lot of them were never found.
There's an old saying here in Canada around Lake Superior that Lake Superior never gives up her dead, and it seems that the Everglades can kind of share the same sentiment.
Oh yes, and we've had, as a matter of fact, and we don't even have to go too further south. Over here, there's like an inlet, which is the Biscayne Bay, which is like a little bay here, right off the coast of Miami. Right. Recently, we've had murders, body parts wash up in bags. Some of them eventually get identified. Some of them are still unidentified, and some of them, they know who it was, but they have never caught the person that did it. Yes, so.
Unreal.
And can you you ask yourself, was it organized crime? Possibly. Never know.
Well, the mob was down in Miami. They tried to certainly take over the structure down there from New York as well as Chicago as well, and Vegas. And of course, Miami is one of the central endpoints for the narcotic trade into the U.S.
Yes. And I mean, I grew up here in Miami, and those days of the 70s and 80s, the cocaine cowboys in Miami, it was well known, and you saw sometimes people overnight go and buy a big house, and it's like, well, okay, no mystery there. But yeah, and a lot of stuff being found out again out in the Everglades, further west from Miami. It didn't even necessarily have to be the Everglades, because there was a point of Miami which was the western part of the county, which was basically uninhabited or mostly agricultural.
Marlene, we're going to have to take a break here because I do have to take my first break. And X Zone Nation, my guest this hour, all the way from sunny and warm Miami at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, is Marlene Pardo. Her website is www. Do you have your pencils ready? Let's try this again. Pencils and paper ready? MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Marlene Pardo is my special guest, and Marlene's website is www.MiamiGhostChronicles.com, and of course she's with Miami Ghost Chronicles. Have you ever had one of those days where your mind says do something and your tongue says, nah, we're going to screw them up, so we're going to do something else? That's exactly what's happening today, and I apologize for that, Marlene. But tell me, are there a lot of urban legends in Miami and surrounding area, and do any of them have anything to do with the influx of the Cuban population?
Well, here in Miami, of course, there's, because of as a matter of fact, it's a crossroads of a lot of cultures. Of course, back in the 60s, it was the Cubans, but eventually we have a lot of other Hispanic and Latin and Caribbean, and we have a lot of people out here. But one of the things is, that here they practice a form. It's not voodoo. It's called Santeria, which is involves animal sacrifice. And there's two versions of it. There's the white magic part of it, which still sacrifices animals, and then there's a dark magic part of it, which sacrifices animals, and in some cases, sometimes people will say that they've sacrificed humans, and these are the ones that you go to, let's say if you wanted to put a death curse on somebody. And over here, I mean, I've done cemetery walks here, and I can guarantee you I'm going to find dead chicken or something stuffed in a bag. You'll see that also on railroad tracks because that's part of spell work and rituals that involves it. Also at four-ways. One time I was at work and my offices, they were very close to a four-way intersection where they even had a crosswalk. And I remember I was out there on a phone. It was a private conversation. And I noticed this big bulging backpack right under where, you push the button to cross the street.
Right.
And I see flies and flies and flies. And I look and I'm seeing something that looks like dark liquid streaming from it. And I was like, and we had, every once in a while, we had seen some weird stuff out there, but never like a bulging backpack. So I called the police and I said, hey, the police officer, he came first to talk to me. And you could tell this was like the call he did not want to take care of. I said, look, there's something weird about it. It's full of flies. It's something dripping from it. From here, it looks like blood. And he went up to it and he nudged it. And when he realized it was full of blood, he called some other officer. And believe it or not, the real concern, despite what everybody may think, is like, what if it's not chickens? What if it's body parts? I mean,
yeah, sure.
But you could tell when I talked to him, he was like, man, why? I don't want to do this. I don't want to handle this. Besides,
it was probably his call just before shift change.
But even if it wasn't, yeah, you could tell. It's almost one of those things where people that are non-believers still don't want to mess with it. Sure enough, when the other officer came, they had to open it just to find out. And sure enough, it was stuffed with chickens, dead chickens, bloody chickens. But there was so much of it that it was actually running. There was like little streams of the blood, and they had left it. And part of that is because part of the ritual is involved leaving it a four-way so that whatever was done cannot follow. Usually it was done to remove something, a curse, let's say, off somebody, for example.
Right.
And it's left there. In other words, whatever it was put in the chickens. They're killed and it's left at the four-way so it cannot go back to the person where it was lifted from. And that's like a condensed version.
Why chickens? Why not some other animal?
I think it depends. It depends on the gravity of what it is. The worse, the bigger the problem, including illness or whatever it is that you're doing, the bigger the animal. Chickens are cheaper, and this is just an example. Maybe a run of bad luck, or hey, you know what? This person's giving me grief at work. Something not really major. Or I think I'm having money troubles and I don't know what's going on. One of those deals. So cheapest, most inexpensive animal and ritual is chickens, but it can go up from there depending on the gravity of the situation. Yeah.
How many paranormal investigations do you and the Miami Ghost Chronicles do a year?
This year, I want to say in the last couple of years, because I've been really busy, it has slowed down. But sometimes I want to average maybe once a month. And it doesn't, how can I say, it doesn't time itself like once a month. Right. It's really funny. You'll go through a spate of, it just slows down. But I do a lot of consulting on the phone. I do have a lot of people that call me and ask me, especially if there is some type of aspect of Santeria involved in it, or just to get feedback from me on certain things. Also, because I'm bilingual, I do go in and speak, to clients that it's just easier for them to speak Spanish. So
sure.
It's really weird. It's comes and goes. Like I said, you go through a few months, nothing happens, and then it all comes in at once, and that's how it works.
In your expert opinion here, how much influence does a person's religious beliefs play in their their interaction with the paranormal?
A lot, a lot. I think it has to do a lot with. I'm gonna say, well, it depends whether it's an actual paranormal event or the belief. I mean, I've gone on cases where when you get there, the truth is there really isn't anything paranormal going on. Sometimes there's stuff that's going on within the family or the household,
Yes.
and I want to say that it's kind of deflected on the paranormal. And other times they've dabbled in stuff they shouldn't. But absolutely, the religious beliefs, how strong they are. Some of them don't want to believe. I've had clients that if they shouldn't believe in it, how's that? But then they start experiencing things, and then after they've gone through all the plausible explanations, and some of them have even reached out to clergy, whatever their religion is, and it's still either they haven't gotten any help or it hasn't resolved it. So it's like we're the last option. And
let me see if I can put a handle on this question. Are most of the people who come to you who claim to have paranormal experiences, are they male or female?
wow.
And I'm just asking
That's a
from
good question.
a statistical,
You know what? I want to say it's a 60-40 split.
Okay.
60 women, 40 men. And to be honest with you, men very seldomly on their own. I want to say it would be 20% that would be on their own. The
Do you
males
want-
in there are part of a family unit.
Do you want to know a secret?
Go ahead.
Men are chickens.
I know. I'm in
Yeah,
on that secret already.
Like, I don't understand it. I really don't. Like, let's be honest with society, gang. Like, when it comes to stuff like this, if you're afraid, if you need to go to a paranormal investigator or see someone to help you out, just go. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Just like, do you remember the old days when we had something in the car that we used to use to help us drive called maps?
Yes.
I learned very early in my marriage just to listen to my wife. Take the directions that she's giving me, because I didn't do that once. And instead of going towards Miami, as a matter of fact, I ended up going out west. So from that point on, it was, yes, dear. So come on, guys. No, there's nothing to be ashamed of, for goodness sake.
No.
But do you think it's the male ego that gets in the way?
It does.
Yeah.
It is the male ego. I want to say that sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to come around to admitting that it might be a paranormal event.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how do you deal with something that you might not be able to see? And men have a hard time with that.
Yeah, and yet these same men go to church.
Yeah. Yes.
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 The Bible is the richest book that has paranormal events than any other book, and it's the oldest book that talks about the paranormal, if you want to look at it that way.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of stuff that,
Sure.
like you say, you can't touch it, see it, feel it, whatever.
And in today's society, it's called the Santa Claus simplex.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I agree with you.
it's crazy. And you know what? With the amount of people that talk about the paranormal, whether it's haunting, if they're touched, if they have a feeling that one of their dearly departed is around, or if they have a dream about a dearly departed, no matter what the case is, it's real. Even if it's just real to the person who's experiencing the effect, it is real. And I think that it should be looked at, it should be investigated, and it should be treated as real, because you have somebody, most of the time, I'm sure you've come across cases where there's really nothing there, that is causing them to have a problem.
Sure.
And I think it's the obligation of us humans to help each other. Welcome back, everyone. Marlene Pardo is our special guest, and she is with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and her website is www.miamighostchronicles.com. And you can also buy the books that Marlene has written over the years at that website again. Once again, www.miamighostchronicles.com. Marlene, as we were talking before we went to the news break, a lot of people are experiencing the phenomenon. Let's call it that for now.
Yes.
Whether it's spirits, whether it's hauntings, whether it's ghosts, or every other aspect of the job that you do when it comes to the investigation of the paranormal. How does a person know who to go to see? I know that you've been doing this a long time, and I have no doubt that you are a professional in what you do. But there are so many others out there, Marlene, who decide to get into this just for the thrill, the rush, the adrenaline rush.
Yes.
How does John Q. Public know who to go to for help?
Well, Rob, as a matter of fact, I just finished publishing one of my last books. It's called Supernatural Safety, which is a paranormal DIY guide.
Right. Well,
This is for one of the things and I've talked about it, other times where it's people need to, like you said, some of these groups that get together, most of the time, maybe the first or second year, they dissolve.
yes.
So I would urge anybody is that if you're to that point where you think I need help, you need to look for a group that has been established a few years, and that you speak to somebody first of all, and go by your gut intuition, because basically you're opening the door to strangers. And I've had prior experiences and cases where they've had groups come in which in reality didn't know what was happening, made things worse, especially if there was a darker aspect to the case. And for lack of a better word, they just peeled out and left this poor family. Hey, oh my God. And so, yeah, it's really important that they do a little bit of research. And in some cases, if they don't have a group that's, let's say, within their area, call the closest one, because most of the well-established groups, they usually can refer you to somebody that will cover the area where you're at.
Gotcha. But some of these groups, I know that a number of paranormal investigators protect themselves in some manner when they go in and come out of a location. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
What happens if these newbies who are just getting into it for the thrill of things because their CB radio doesn't work anymore, they need to do something?
Yes.
They don't take the precautions that you and other professionals take. Is it possible that they may bring something else into that home that complicates the matter?
Yes, and absolutely. I have had team leaders call me because, this is the thing. You have people that join groups because they're excited, they want to do it. And then when they go and they do investigations and they don't it's not like some of the shows where something actually happens all the time, or it's on the weekend. What, you mean I have to give up my weekend? So sometimes they lose members or they need somebody to go on an investigation. So, most of them do have a vetting process for new members, but they have had instances where they've brought people along that, for lack of a better word, I'd say something was walking with them already. And yes, absolutely. And if they end up in an investigation which has its own dark aspect or malevolence going on, and sometimes the team leader thinks, oh, this member picked up an attachment or something from that investigation, and not really, that was with them from before. And a lot of these team leaders, what they have to think of is the liability as far as the safety of my members. And I'm not talking just physical safety, which of course you always think about,
Sure.
but I'm spiritual safety for your members when you bring in somebody new. And then, yes, I've heard of that some people, their attraction to work in this is because they have their own spiritual turbulence surrounding them already to begin with.
I've also heard that when people go to estate auctions or to garage sales, they buy these items, bring them home, and all of a sudden they've got a problem in their house.
Yes, absolutely. And I that, especially, they have now these curbside, where people will just put out items on the curb because it's like, hey, it's good if somebody needs it. And it could be, I tell people, it could be the most innocuous looking item. And most people are thinking, wow, I could use that, or it's nice. But for all you know, and this is a for instance, it could have been Uncle Jim or Grandpa's favorite chair in his lamp, which he's still attached to. Or sometimes it has a darker aspect. Sometimes there's things that are left on the curbside for a reason. Because that family realizes there's something, maybe they picked it up somewhere, a garage sale, a thrift store, they bought, it could be a million things. A flea market. Flea markets are notorious for that. And they're like, hey, sorry, I don't care if somebody ends up with this problem, but I'm getting rid of it, and they leave it on the curbside. So I tell people, you got to follow your intuition and cleanse it, and spiritually, whether by prayer, holy water, whatever, before you bring that into your home. Because I've had cases where the problem, the source of it, is a cursed or an object that's got an attachment to it.
You briefly mentioned the TV shows that are out there now. It's just like when I was in the police force. You know, the shows on TV, let's use Miami Vice or CSI Miami, they show all this action that happens in 44 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
And people would say, wow, you know, what did you do on surveillance? Well, we sat there.
Exactly.
and waited. You know, like it doesn't happen like it does on TV. So my question to you as a professional again is, are these television shows an asset or a hindrance to professional investigators like yourself?
Oh, it's a hindrance and an asset. It's made it more mainstream. In other words, it's okay. There's not that much stigma because before, remember, because I tell people, I was doing this when you had to develop film. There was no digital. That's like, there was kind of a stigma attached to sometimes coming out and saying, man, I think my house is haunted. Yeah. It was like, you still got a funny look. And it's made it more mainstream, more acceptable. And now the flip side of it is that people immediately think that their house is haunted because they got a weird noise coming on. And when you tell them, no, it's not, you've got a raccoon in your attic, you sure? It's like, yeah. or you might have, you need to check your vents. You give them a non-paranormal source for it, they're kind of disappointed. And I want to say the more, and I'm going to use this word lightly, but the more dangerous aspect, Rob, is the following. I've gone on investigations. I am one of the paranormal investigators that I do not believe that live humans, should coexist with deceased human beings.
Oh, I agree with you.
That are bound to the earth. I say, you know what? Your loved ones, they go on into the presence of God, the divine, whatever you want to call it. Maybe one day they kind of look in on you. You're good. Okay, see ya. But when you're talking a soul that's bound to the earth, and you see a lot of these shows where they say, oh, well, it's not malevolent. Nothing's happened. It's okay. And I'm like, big mistake. And I've gone on investigations where, it has turned out there is a supernatural agent there. And basically, the individual, the family is all happy. And what they want to do is confirm it. And can you give me a name? And it's like, we could do that. But, really, we need to cross this soul over. It's a human soul. Let's say we're going to go with a human thing. And they're like, no. And I'm like, I'm telling you. Even though maybe the things that have been happening are kind of innocent, like, haunting light, I tell them, sooner or later, it might take years, this is going to go south on you. I guarantee it.
Do you find that there's not enough respect shown towards the deceased or the dearly departed these days, that because of the notoriety of being a paranormal investigator or a ghost hunter, we're actually seeing more disrespect towards the dead?
Yes, absolutely. Because people seem to forget, and I'm not talking here any non-human entities. Okay, there's two different. I'm talking here, but the bulk of it, you're talking a human soul. You're talking a human that's lost, that somewhere they didn't transition, they lost their way for a variety of reasons. It could be many, many things. But it's a human soul. Why would you want to keep a human soul bound to a place out of the presence of God and the divine? I don't get it. It's basically you end up with a very angry, frustrated, confused human being that doesn't have a body, and they maybe, you do have some ghosts that are aware that they're dead and they're bound for other reasons. Then you have others that are confused. But yes, absolutely, it's like, I think that people forget that you're in reality still talking about a human being, the soul of a human being.
I love the way you think, young lady. I agree with you
Thank you.
100%.
Thanks for that young lady thing.
Listen, you and I have to take our final break.
Hour, so
Marlene Nation is Marlene Pardo. She is the lady responsible and in charge of Miami Ghost Chronicles. Her website is miamighostchronicles.com. First of all, Marlene, I want to thank you ever so much for coming on the show. Please don't be a stranger. Come back again and visit us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's been my pleasure, Rob.
Now, Marlene, one of the books that you were telling us about briefly in a previous segment was one that you just released in December. It's available on your website and on Amazon.com, and it's entitled Supernatural Safety. Tell me about that, because I think that's a marvelous idea.
Well, this is for people that sometimes think, something's happening. And at the beginning, I described several sources for non-paranormal events. And in other words, I say, before you jump to the conclusion that it's paranormal, try these things. Call an electrician, have this checked out. In other words, despite what people think, your best outcome is that it's not paranormal. And then I described the different types of supernatural events that could be taking place, what the source is. And I mean, there are moments and situations where I say you need to have somebody come in, clergy, a group, a well-established group. But otherwise, these are the things that you can do. And one of the reasons I wrote the book, Rob, is that people, especially that they give up their power. They think that they're full of fear, and it's like you need to claim your space. You're a living human being. This is where you live,
right?
And you have more power than you think to either help an entity, a spirit, cross over. I mean, I described various things that people can do, but in other words, I think it's more important that people realize that they're not helpless, and also to identify certain scenarios where you need to step back and get somebody experienced. And usually these are something involving either non-human entities or something with a darker aspect. But even at the same time, and this is one of the things that I describe, a lot of people, when you see these shows, let's say they have either a group or maybe even clergy come in and something happens and it's over. And that's not really the way it works. This family or this individual has to keep working at it to keep this area clear. This, I want to say, this bleeds over into your life and in your psyche. So even if you get that group or a cleansing or prayer or banishment, whatever, you still need to do something to keep yourself and your space clear. And, because I do understand also human behavior, I tell people, you need to go out there. Besides what you do, you need to be happy. Go to the park. See happy things. One of the best antidotes to any type of supernatural or paranormal situation is laughter. I know people will think, well, who wants to laugh? You need to laugh, because this, in a lot of cases, especially if it's darker, what it's feeding off is the fear that we generate.
That's right. So you're changing the polarity by laughing. It causes a positive effect instead of allowing the entity to suck you dry of your negativity.
Yes.
Something I've noticed over the years, and this, because I've been doing this so long, it gives me a unique outlook into the trends that are going on in all aspects of the paranormal, whether it be Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, or hauntings, is that the trend today with most ghost teams and researchers is there has to be a demonic particle into the whatever they're doing.
Oh my God, the D word.
The D word, yeah.
Yeah.
Why, in your opinion, is that happening?
Because it's scary. It's shock value.
Shock value.
And I'm going to give you an fact. You remember back in 1973 when The Exorcist came out?
Oh,
people were pulling their hair out, and the churches got full because we were kind of innocent. Right before that, I think the hardest thing was Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, my God.
But we were kind of like, everybody was like, oh. Yeah. And now, because we've been inundated with
Hmm.
so many, like I said, there's no more movies just about a haunting. There's always got to be some demonic aspect or possession
Yeah.
to it, that people are, it's shock value, it's scarier. So it's just a ghost. Oh, no, 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 we need a ghost that's going to try to possess you, or the devil, or, and it's like, it's, I think it's entertainment overdone, and I stated it. True possession is very, very rare. There's different levels. There's obsession, there's influence, there's oppression, there's obsession, there's a lot of things. I In my hypnotherapy, I've done spiritual attachments. I've dealt with spiritual attachments, and I have encountered, not very common, but one of my clients that had a non-human entity attached. And it's an it's a very sobering experience. And if people, I think, realize the true horror that lies behind it, they would not be so trying to pursue it.
You know what happens if you don't pay the exorcist, eh?
Oh my God, let's hear it.
You get repossessed.
Oh my God,
Sorry,
that's good though. That's good.
I could not help that one. What has been the most frightening or the most haunted location that you have ever investigated? And what did you find?
Believe it or not, I want to say that, I mean, I've been on a lot of cases,
Hmm.
but I want to say that that instance that I gave you where I had somebody in my office, and it just so happens that I always used to have another hypnotist there with me.
Hmm.
And that one time that she couldn't come in, and this was a client that I had already worked with before for smoking. So we had kind of, we got along well, and he came and he explained to me what was going on with him. And when, I mean, it's a process. I'm doing like a very condensed version. Finally, when I was speaking to whatever was in there, and this thing is hissing at me, and I knew this young man. I had dealt with him. I had hypnotized him before, and I've also had other instances where I have seen somebody or something inside a person that is not human. And you know that now there's that thing with the black-eyed kids or the black-eyed people.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exactly that physicality. There's something in the person's eyes, that it's the look, the stare, and I don't mean to sound dramatic. And I think anybody that's truly experienced this will understand what I'm talking about.
Could that be because they're using the term here, lost souls? Their life force is just totally gone.
I have dealt with attachments where we're talking a deceased human being that's attached in the aura. It's different. Okay, this I'm talking non-human. And by the way, besides non-human, there's demonic, there's other types of non-human entities, which is very rare. That's why when you ask me what's the scariest, when there is the you know how we always think of dealing with other human beings, there's no pity, there's no moral compass, there is no bargaining, there's something there that's not another human being, even though in the cases where I dealt with it, it was inside a human being.
Oh my gosh.
And let me tell you, I think if some people really had that experience, they would think twice about, because I hate to say it, that some people pursue this sometimes. They want to have that shock and awe moment.
Yes.
And besides that, there's something that some people don't realize, that are cemeteries. A lot of ghost groups and kids, sometimes they run out to the cemeteries. There's something called cemetery sentinels. Okay, now cemetery sentinels are non-human, but they're not demonic per se. Cemetery sentinels sometimes could be invoked, but most of the time you will find them at older graveyards, because you need X amount of graves or burials there. Usually they're attracted by the mourning. When people go to the cemetery, it's mourning, anger, sadness. They feed off of this. They usually don't mess with the living unless you desecrate or you mess around with it. I have had encounters with that. And in the book I stated, if you ever come across this, I say do not, let me underline that, do not engage it, try to photograph it, just like walk away. Usually you see it as a very tall shadow figures. I have seen it sometimes smaller, perched in the branches of a tree. They'll observe you, and you just ignore them. Just pretend, because I'm telling you, I have dealt with people who have had an attachment, and to get rid of it is not like an exorcism. Once they become attached to a person, usually because they've desecrated or done something in the graveyard, it's trying to convince them to break the connection and go back. It's not like it's a very weird thing, and a lot of people are not aware that you could go to most cemeteries, unless they're really, really small. Most cemeteries will have more than one cemetery sentinel there, a graveyard sentinel.
Marlene, the time has come when you and I must say so long for tonight, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure. Continued success, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone.
Take care.
You take.
So, guys, what did you think? Interesting interview. I know you've heard some version of what I said a lot of times when I've interviewed different people. And again, sometimes this happens where many years of experience, they're compressed into 45 minutes of a radio show or anything else. And sometimes when you've been doing this for a really long time and people ask you this, you draw a blank, because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of cases that are impactful, others not. And I want to say that it's one of those things where, again, I'm serious. And, when I wrote that book, Supernatural Safety, I think that a lot of people, they could solve their problems because either one of two things. Either they have an attachment that they've been walking around. Sometimes it's even a loved one. A lot of times people, how can I say this? Sometimes grief or events, things can, I don't want to say they're like a ghost, but they almost, especially if the person's been experiencing it a long time and carrying it with them, and never letting it go, it almost takes on a life of its own. And in some cases I've seen where if this is not the source of the event, it makes it worse. It's like fuel to the fire. But anyway, again, really truly horrific hauntings like possessions are rare. They are rare, despite what you see in the shows. That there's attachments, yes. You can get rid of them, yes. That there's times where you say no, but even then, my advice is that before, during, and after, even if you have somebody come and help you, a priest, clergy, a group, whatever the case might be, there's something that you need to do in your life. Change, whether it's prayer. I mean, I give a lot of examples in the book as to situations, because ultimately, this is what I say. When you see these shows, you see the group roll up, do their thing, pick up their equipment or whatever the case might be, roll away. And there's that family or that person having to still live with it. And one of the things that sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That some of these families, again, they might have been having really horrifying experiences, and something happens that was driven out or whatever. And if you don't think that this family is still afraid that it's going to come back, of course they are. Or that you have memories attached, depending maybe how long it's been going on, of course. And let's face it, some people either can't or don't want to move away. Financially, they might not be able to, or maybe they don't want to. Maybe this is their family home. There's a lot of things that people can do. And I tell people, after something, paint, move furniture around, make it new or different, and incorporate and say, I have to do something, in which I give a lot of examples again in the book of what you could do. so that I don't open the pathway. And I know a lot of times they don't discuss this in a lot of the shows, but for some reason, and I've said it before, for some reason there's people that are more vulnerable to the supernatural than others. Many for 3 reasons. 1, they might have latent psychic slash as a medium, because let me explain, you can be a psychic and not be a medium. Mediums usually are the ones that can more readily see and even channel a spirit. Okay? And some people are aware of it, some people run away from it, so sometimes that person will always have a following, because a lot of these deceased human beings, these spirits, for some reason they just want to say something. It's like, this is who I am, this happened to it. I don't know, it's really weird. They just want acknowledgement, or they want somebody to say it's okay. It's that's a whole nother show. Okay, that trauma in childhood. For some reason, people that have trauma in childhood, not everybody, for some reason that opens like a vulnerability, like a wound that even if the person has gone to therapy and worked out, truly, not saying I'm okay with it, really truly done the work and accepted it and worked around it. Acceptance in the part of who they were or their experience and the situation that brought it into being and how it was resolved or not, who was responsible, who wasn't, who facilitated. But for some reason, they always have this vulnerability to the paranormal. And I'm going to, because let's face it, most human beings that are trapped, again, we're not talking non-human, we're not talking demonic, we're talking here deceased human beings. Most deceased human beings that fail to transition, there's usually some low-level emotion attached to them, to their existence. Sorrow, fear, anger, sometimes confusion. But usually behind that confusion, there was something other negative emotion. And sometimes they will gravitate to, like a like attract like. Okay, if you have somebody that's had traumatic, even many, many years, but if they have PTSD, if they relive it, because they've never been able, they keep that memory fresh, that emotion, that anguish, sadness, whatever comes about, that helplessness, victimization, whatever. It almost acts like a magnifying glass, like a beep, 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 like a, for attracting spirits. Like I said, because the majority of trapped souls have had some type of aspect to them. You could say you might have a human soul who's just angry. He was an angry person when he was alive, and he's still angry. And then you've got this human being who's really sad, but expresses by being really angry all the time. And they're like, hey. And this person might be walking around saying, man, what? They have supernatural experience, they have paranormal experiences, maybe they see things, sometimes horrific, sometimes sometimes if they're pulling in, let's say, angry deceased human beings, they themselves might be thinking, man, because this is the thing, usually we have our aura, and if you get one of these low-level human entities around you, they're not going to attach to you, but sometimes you feel it, especially if, let's say if you're angry for good reason, it's a human condition. And then all of a sudden, you go from 0 to 60 and nothing. And if you might be having something around you that is putting the pedal down, making you feel more angry, that you might even say, man, yeah, I know I'm angry, but I'm ready to tear somebody's head off. And then you hear a bang in the bathroom or something upstairs. Yes, that type of that's what I'm saying. There's some people that they're vulnerable. They pull in for different reasons, psychic abilities, like attract like, unresolved trauma, and some people. The third group is the people that go looking for it. The people that go looking for it. And then, and I've talked about this before, they put out the invite. And then it's you can't rescind the invite. And I want to say, of all of those, the ones that have a good possibility of crossing paths with something dark, and here I'm going to go again, whether it's non-human, there's a lot of human souls out there, folks, who are very, very dark. They're human. It's a human entity. It's human. But they're very dark. Maybe they were plagued with an attachment of a non-human entity. But even so, let's take that out of the equation. There's a lot of evil and bad people out there. And when they pass away, they're still there. So if they're earthbound especially. And these sometimes are the ones that take up your invitation when you go looking for it, whether it's a Ouija board. And again, before somebody has people, there's different types of spirit communication. And there's a lot of people that know what they're doing. And by the way, they know how to protect themselves. They know how to open and close sessions. They have what I call the spidey sense when something really dark is there and how to dissipate it. And a lot of these people don't dabble in it constantly. They put it away. Because for some reason, these entities know right away when they've got a novice on their hands. And it's like fresh meat. They go for it quick. So that's why there's some people that they act as a conduit for negative hauntings. And then it follows them around. And it's almost like, when you have the guy with the t-shirt next to you with the arrow pointing at you, or the neon, that's who you become. That's who you become. And then, I've had investigations where I tell everybody, I usually, this is after the pre-interview and I'm there, and let's say it's a family member, and I usually interview everybody out of hearing of everybody else. I take them outside or someplace where they don't have to fear they're going to be overheard, because you get a lot of different versions then when you're by yourself with the one person. And then they a lot of times will then start talking about prior supernatural experiences, and then you realize, yeah, you might have something here, but there's something about you, either it came with you or there's something about you that you are like a whirlwind. You have stirred everything up. And maybe something's been here before and it was very low level or non-existent or dormant, but there's something about you, a spiritual turbulence that walks with you that has amped it up. And like I said, every case is different, but again, I agree with Rob that a lot of times in the notoriety of these shows, we forget that in many cases we're speaking about human souls. Non-human and demonic entities do exist. They're very rare. And I think that it's a problem because people don't realize that if you cross paths with something like this and it enters into your life, I want to go out here and I want to say it again, your life will never be the same again. Never. You might dispel it. The bonds between you and that thing will be broken, especially, depending on what type of connection there was, but you will never be the same again. Because you will understand something. Because I'm telling you, you could go to the movies now and you could see The Exorcist, or you could see any of these other movies that have been made about people being possessed, and you're scared, and oh my God, and even if they say it's based on a true story, whatever. But at the end of the day, as human beings, we kind of go, oh, this is just made up. Oh. Anyway, and at the end, somebody comes in and saves the day, whatever. Exorcises the demon or the thing and binds it. What? Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way. If people really truly understood it, it's much more horrific than what you see in maybe 90 minutes of a movie. And your life will never be the same. And the people that it's happened to, their reality is never the same. They could talk about it and tell people about it, and people will go, oh my God, that's so horrible. But nobody ever truly understands and what's the word I'm looking for? Gets it until they've had that experience, which, believe me, you pray you never do, because your life will never be the same again. Your belief system is different. Plus, you're always, it's just, your reality is different. Your reality, because we always comfort ourselves. Let's say, even if let's say, you have somebody that that you believe, in other words, that you don't think this person's lying, and they tell you a story that happened. This happened to them. They went through that, and you get really scared. But as the days pass by, you go, oh, but that wouldn't happen. You know how it always happens to the other person. So we kind of comfort ourselves, and we move away from the truth or the possibility that stuff like that happens, which doesn't happen. And we kind of like, it fades away. The fear, like after a few days, it kind of like fades away. Not for the person that's had that experience. Because you do understand that something exists which has none of the, how can I say, feelings or mental processes, I guess is the best thing, of humans. That there is no, that just wants your destruction. That there is just hatred. That there is no empathy, no pity, no bargaining, no. And by the way, the ultimate aim of possession, despite what you see with the people and all this hissing to whatever, all the crap, that's not really the ultimate aim. The ultimate aim is to corrupt and possess that person so that they will commit evil acts and then cause suffering to other human beings around it. It's like a ripple effect. It's almost like this evil cannot commit it without the human being to do it for them. Okay, think about it. The ultimate aim, even in possessed, and there's people that sometimes are possessed, and contrary to what people think as far as what they call perfect possessions, or whether it's a voluntary possession, sometimes this person will run around and look kind of normal, and depending on their intelligence or their position in life, they could get away with doing horrible things for years, and maybe even die in old age, and nobody's all the wiser. And they might have done horrible things. The aim being of that this evil that has them in its grip is like, you're my vehicle to sow anguish, anger, sadness in other human beings, whatever the case might be, whether it's killing, a torture. It could. There's a lot of ways for us human beings we could be made to suffer. And yeah, it's much more terrible and horrible than what people see. That's why I'm saying, when Rob asked me about that, I said, yeah, of course, entertainment is like, hey, we want people glued to it and watch it, and like, what's more scary than that? But it's truly terrible and horrible and terrorizing, and it shouldn't be glamorized. It should not be glamorized in the least. Believe me, because for people that have had that experience, they can never undo it. The knowing, the experience, they can never undo it. You know, like in The Exorcist, I don't know, maybe some people, The Exorcist, supposedly at the end of the movie, the little girl, she can't remember anything. Okay, all right, sure. No, there is no convenient amnesia that's going to step in and take away those memories or that knowing. So let me get off my soapbox. So anyway, guys, it's the paranormal is very fascinating. Okay, and I think there's a lot of things that are still evolving because our plane in spirituality is very enmeshed. But there should always be very strong boundaries between the living and the deceased and other things of what Father Malachi Martin used to call the middle plateau. There's things there that, whoa, and with good reason, okay? That we should have empathy and pity for deceased human beings that are confused, absolutely. That we should have not want anything to do with something that's malevolent, yes. I mean, believe me, there's no middle ground there. There's no exceptions to that rule. So there's a part of fearlessness that you should have, caution, respect, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. There are times where human beings, your best bet in certain moments is to grab your stuff and leave, back out, retreat, because either it's dark, you're not prepared for it, you're outgunned, and in other words, it becomes more than what people think that they're going to get into when they become a paranormal investigator or when they go on paranormal investigation. Like, yeah, okay, and you know, whatever. It's like, this is not what you want. This is not what you want. And what are you going to do? Have you ever thought, as a paranormal investigator? Let's say you go out on an investigation and you do the first visit and you maybe you have equipment and stuff, but you really haven't had a chance to go through your audio, video stuff that you captured. Maybe you got some stuff that you heard or saw visually with your naked eye, but you really haven't had a chance. And you're thinking, well, okay. And you're kind of thinking, well, there might be something there. You're getting like a bad feeling, but and maybe you had one of your members do confrontation stupidly. And then the next day or the next night or 2 hours after you leave, you get a frantic call from that client that everything has become horrible, that things are going crazy, that they don't know what they're ready to like go and sleep at the motel because they can't stay in their house. And that happens. Yet usually happens, number one, because there's somebody there that doesn't have enough experience to either they confrontation, they didn't realize it was a dark haunting, or they just didn't recognize it for what it was. I mean, there's a lot of things to that stuff that people sometimes don't think about when they go and they see the paranormal shows, that it's 45 minutes. And of course, let's face it, folks, these are not paranormal investigators. They're entertainers. Yeah, they're going to call themselves paranormal investigators. Sure, of course. Whatever. I mean, otherwise, what's the premise for the show? You know, but they've got producers and directors and gophers that handle everything behind the scenes and blah, 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 blah. They roll in. They do their thing. And yeah, sometimes they capture stuff, other times they don't, whatever. And then they roll out off to the next show. Those are not really paranormal investigators. It's not. Sometimes it's very boring, and other times it's like there's more to it than what you see on the shows. So again, guys, I hope you like this interview with Rob. Again, I'm going to get off my soapbox again. Because what Rob, I guess about I got on it because of what Rob said, where people decide that they're going to do paranormal investigations and they just don't really understand what it is that they're going to get involved in. And it wouldn't be, by the way, the first time I've heard of brand new investigators getting targeted. They just so happen to, the beginner's luck. First case they go on is really dark, and whatever is there goes, hey, that person has no idea what's going on. And they walk away with an attachment. Because they were just going there to see, oh my God, let me see what happens. All right. And then they call up their team leader a couple of days later going, hey, you know what? I woke up and there was something standing at the foot of my bed. A dark shadow. What do you mean? Yeah. Or I have this feeling now that something's watching me. Or, hey, I heard something tapping at the window of my bedroom. Or, hey, I've heard, believe it or not, all those versions I've heard about. So we'll do a show about. But anyway, guys, don't forget, go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com. There you have links to the videos, the MP3s for the podcast version. I have links to podcast platforms. Again, all my books, you can buy them there. You can buy them at Amazon. I'm now doing because this was the only way I could find to do my True Story Believers, which is Supernatural StoryTime. I'm going to be releasing separate shows for that where I'm retelling some of the stories because, like I said, even before I started doing the show, I used to receive emails all the time about people telling me, hey, I've had this experience. And I started going back through some of them, and I'm just going to retell them. They're scary stories. And again, these stories are not, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. People sometimes move to a place and they have these experiences and they really don't know the origin, and sometimes it never gets resolved. All I can say is, man, we lived there and all this happened to us, and we got to the point that we all had to move. So it's not like an investigation. It's experiences that people have had. And sometimes people do understand what it is. Some people even know who the ghost is. But anyway, I think you guys are going to like it because that was the only way I could incorporate all these stories that I've had from before and other ones that have been sent to me. And again, guys, if you've got a story, you can write it to me. Go to my Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. On the website, there's a Submit Your Story tab. And again, it doesn't have to be ghostly. It could be anything else. It could be something that's been retold to you, because I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, I this friend of mine told me this story, blah, blah. It's not their own first-hand. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a first-hand experience. Absolutely. And if you give me permission, I'll give you credit for it. I'll say this was sent by. If you want to remain anonymous, I'm good with that too. But either way, guys, thank you so much. You are all wonderful. Take care.